Welcome friends, new and old. I'm back this week talking about Doctor Who, the 60th anniversary, the first special, The Star Beast, and this will be filled with some spoilers, not only from the episode, but from the comic itself, so consider this your final warning if those aren't for you. Now let's crack on with the show. So here I am, pretty late, we're almost up to the next special and I haven't even discussed this one yet, but I kind of wanted to get my feet under me and think about it a little bit more, and I wanted to do something a little bit different and kind of bring in the comic book story a little bit as well, since a lot of the people out there talking about it have referenced the comic, but they aren't necessarily actually digging into the storyline itself, and there are a few changes from the comic. So did this work for me? Well, this is probably going to be one of those middle-of-the-road milquetoast, basically not even worth doing videos because I kind of fall in the middle, but let's talk about it. So like I said, I wanted to address the comics a little bit. So the biggest change right out of the gate is obviously the story in the comic was a fourth Doctor story, Tom Baker, with K9 being the companion, although K9 was barely in the story, and the kids within the story are kind of really the companions. But the character in the story who is the main focal point was Fudge. Now he was shown in this episode as a friend of Rose, and basically, he had very little to do, but he was in the story, so I do like that. And I think that Rose, Donna's daughter, was actually being used in place of Sharon in the storyline. And Sharon actually, at the end, spoilers for the comic as well, became the new companion, at least for a little while. The comic and the show have a pretty different Meep as well. It's blue in the comic, which I guess isn't a huge change, but it's also a him. The non-binary situation, the I refer to myself as the Meep, that's not present in the comic whatsoever. That was an addition or a tweak to this episode. It definitely feels like they took the binary words that we saw when the Metacrisis thing was taking over Donna before and kind of worked backwards from that phrase to build the story. So they took the Star Beast story, slightly tweaked it, they took the Dr. Donna story, brought them all into a blender, kind of mixed them up, and then threw in a few new components to kind of, weld them together so they fit a little bit more coherently at least. There were also a few other changes, most notably the Rarth Warriors and the way that the ship functioned and the ship worked. So talking about the Rarth Warriors, they were a little bit more bloodthirsty and brutal in the comic. Their actual plan was similar to how it was in the story, except they used the Doctor as a living bomb. They knocked him out, they did surgery on him, they implanted a bomb into the body of the fourth Doctor so that when he got close to the Meep, they could detonate, killing just the Meep, the Doctor, all this collateral damage. In the show, they were portrayed much more nobly. They were only stunning their victims. They didn't want to kill anyone except the Meep. The few little occasions we got to see them talking, they definitely seemed more gentle, and I'm wondering what the reason for those changes were. Were they just trying to make this a bit more family friendly, or did they want to create this race of characters who they could potentially use in the future and have less horrible baggage, I guess, around them? They could make these a more noble space police force, although we've already gotten 32 of those in Doctor Who, so having another one, why not keep adding to the list? Oh, I also mentioned they changed the technology a couple of ways. It was a black sun in the comics. I don't know why they changed it to this mad sun, this psychedelic sun here. Maybe they just wanted the effects to be more colorful, whimsical, and to have a rainbow effect other than just a black light effect. I'm not certain. Maybe there was some purpose to that we'll discover down the line. They also changed the technology of the ship. In the show, it was a dagger drive, which felt a little bit more visceral. It actually reminded me of the first appearance of David Tennant with the Sycorax, where they were using the blood magic. This very crude technology the Doctor was kind of appalled by, so I kind of think it was the same thing here. They're using this dagger drive, which just rips the Earth apart and would destroy London, 9 million people. I think that might have just been a more visceral, physical way to show that the Meep had no care for these beings and was going to destroy everyone. I also think that the way it was portrayed in the comic just may have been too costly. The reality warping, the black holes. So I'm thinking it was probably just more of a budgetary thing as well as a potentially more in-your-face way to represent what was going on. Also, this could all be playing into things we'll learn about later. I'm not entirely sure about that. A big thing in the comic was the Doctor inventing this device called a Fizzgig to kind of deal with the situation. In the show, we saw a very high and new utilization of the sonic screwdriver to the point where these are just brand new effects, and I'm wondering if those are going to come back into play in the future, because if they don't, that's another case of introducing new powers that we're not actually going to see again. And to me, these felt very Iron Man-ish, like they wanted to implement these more MCU-laden things that would just add to the show and make it feel a bit more epic. And I worry that that could be a danger going forward to kind of change the show into something that it isn't. It seems like they're trying to build this into a more epic type of universe, and I hope it doesn't lose its own identity in the process. But for right now, I am enjoying this. It did feel a little bit epic, and maybe there'll be an explanation down the line that when the screwdriver is destroyed, it loses those abilities. Whatever, they could always write around it if they need to, but that's just my feeling right now. I also want to address this picture right here. We see in the comic the way that the TARDIS was designed had a black plaque with white writing, and I think that that may potentially be the reason they redesigned the TARDIS to look this way in the show, as a nod to this and just as a way to update the look of it. I'm not sure if that's the case. I also thought that Cyberdog in the show may have been a reference to K9, who was part of this story, but somebody informed me that's actually a real store over there. So I guess if that was the case, maybe it was just a happy coincidence. So now my opinion on the episode in and of itself. I thought that it was actually enjoyable. I thought it was a good choice to bring back David Tennant and Donna for this episode, but I do have some mixed feelings as far as how everything wrapped up. I liked the whole Rose storyline. I thought it was a little heavy-handed in places, but it worked. I just feel that maybe the show has become a victim of its own increasing stories, something similar to what's going on in Star Trek, where everything has to be a galactic ending event. This felt a little bit more small scale, and I don't dislike that. I actually prefer when stories feel a bit more small scale, but to have this be the resolution to and the reason the Doctor and Donna have to come back together, and Donna has to almost kind of die for the cause, it just felt a little bit low stakes compared to all of these world-ending, universe-ending, multiverse-ending things that have happened before. To have this be the reason Donna has to come out of retirement, remember, burn her mind, all of that stuff, it just didn't feel quite as grand as I would have liked that thing to be. Now, obviously, she didn't die. She passed her stuff along to her daughter, so they were able to share the load of the meta crisis, I suppose you could say. And then at the end, they just give it up. I have to imagine that energy went somewhere. Is that going to come back into play down the line? I don't know. I actually have thoughts. I kind of think the whole thing is being orchestrated outside of time and space right now, or just in some manner, but I'll get to that in a little bit. All of the interactions between the Doctor and Donna were fantastic, and that is 100% what this entire special is revolving around. That is the core of this episode. The Starbeast story was fun, and while it's great to see this whole adaptation from a comic being brought onto the screen, I feel like towards the end, once they switched back to the focus on Donna getting her memories back, the whole story with Rose, all of that stuff, I felt like they just kind of let the Starbeast story go by the wayside, and I think that is why they changed a little bit of the ending of the story. So we get the Rarth Warriors, not the main two because those died, still out there, still being somewhat benevolent. We get the Meep being taken into custody and mentioning this grand boss out there. So I think some of these stories were made in order to bring these characters back down the line. So they're not just one-off characters. To develop them into their own thing outside of this storyline from the comic so that they can make whatever changes to them they want in the future without being withholden to what we saw in the comic, because now they'll just be a part of the actual Alpha Canon universe. What I found a little bit jarring is what came just before the intro with that whole recap sequence with them talking directly to the camera, having David Tennant stand in front of what is clearly a green screen and just compositing him into space. That felt very rushed and not well thought out, and I think that was probably maybe a last-minute mandate. I think they absolutely did need to have a recap to get people up to speed, but the way they did it just felt clunky to me and kind of put me off before I even got into the episode proper. That's just a small nitpick though, because it didn't actually play into the episode. Now, potentially down the line, it may, because I have these thoughts that this is not actually happening in reality, or if it is, it's a pocket reality. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it felt like maybe all of these things were being orchestrated outside of time and space, possibly by the toy maker, possibly by somebody else. I'm not certain, but it kind of feels like, especially with all of the Disney and Marvel Easter eggs in here, aside from the fact that Disney is funding this, so it's probably just because of that, it felt like maybe, just maybe, somebody orchestrated this and they pulled from the comic. So I think there might be some meta stuff going on where they used a Doctor Who comic to put this version of the Doctor into this pocket dimension. They tore him out during the regeneration, so that's why things are all confusing right now. Bringing back Donna, this latent memory that's just kind of been eating at him ever since it happened, or something along those lines. I'm not really describing this, but in my head it kind of makes sense that this is all a toy box, I guess you could say, and this is all being orchestrated. Bringing Donna back may have been the grand plan, to release that energy, to get her to unlock that Time Lord energy and to release it back into the atmosphere, or whatever you want to say, so that somebody could potentially harness that to come back into our universe to get Time Lord powers himself. I don't know. I'm wildly speculating right now, but I feel like there has to be a lot more going on here than the more straightforward story they seem to be telling, and the straightforward way they just wrapped up the Dr. Donna after so long of sitting with that. And that's another thing I'm slightly torn on. I like the fact that Donna gets to live. I like the fact that she gets these memories back, that this missing piece of her life is now intact. But I also feel like it slightly undercuts that emotional sacrifice and that very emotional ending we had way back in the day. So that's why I'm hoping there's more to come. I don't want her to die. I don't want anyone from her family to die. But I feel like it slightly undercuts that emotion, and maybe the real resolution we're about to see will kind of get that feeling back and will feel like it was earned. I thought that this was a fun episode, like I said, but there could be improvement, and I definitely think that it's just kind of setting the stage for all of these weird and universe-shattering things that are going to happen in the next couple of specials. And while I'm on the subject, or just got off the subject of some mysterious grand person who may be running things in the background, who was Rose selling all of these toys to? It seemed a bit conspicuous to mention them not once, but at least twice during the episode, that one woman in Dubai was buying all of the toys that Rose was selling, and then we learned that these toys are actually based upon the various and sundry creatures they've encountered throughout the travels in the universe, even though some of them were not encountered necessarily by Donna herself and after the Doctor left. So that is kind of interesting as well. Did Rose already have a connection to all of the history of the Doctor, even future events? I don't know. Once again, I'm waffling a little bit, but it just seems like this may be somebody who becomes important down the line, especially considering RTD always loves dropping these hints and breadcrumbs and connecting all these things back later on. I haven't worked out the code words, but I'm hoping that some of them mean something. Some of them have very obvious references, like Sparrow, obviously that being to the episode Blink. Mexico, I'm wondering if that's a relation to the comic, because in the comic he was intending to go to Mexico. The Doctor even had a sombrero as he came out of the TARDIS, but once again, I'm just speculating. There's definitely probably something going on with these code words, and I'm wondering if we'll get a resolution to those in-universe, in canon, or if they're just Easter eggs for us as fans to look at. Really love the interior of the TARDIS, but overall, I think this episode could have done with some improvements, but a lot of my feelings are just pending what happens in the future, because some of the things, while not feeling like loose threads, I think actually will become loose threads when those are revealed and tied up later on. Those are my thoughts. What did you think of this episode? What did you think of the special? Where do you think we're going from here? Or are you just completely checked out of Doctor Who and this isn't something that's going to bring you back into the fold? Leave all your thoughts down below. Like, share, subscribe, do all those YouTube things. If you want to see more of the comic pictures, I did post them to my Ko-fi account, or Ko-fi, however you say it. I think it's Ko-fi. If you want to take a look at those, it's free. You don't have to pay. But until next time...
Word of advice. You can wear a suit that tight up to the age of 35 and no further.